Emergency pod. Trump wants to sell H200s to China. On to discuss the great Dmitri Alperovich of the Silverado Policy Accelerator. I would like to kick it off by pouring one out to the very unfortunate U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Texas, Nicholas John Ganji, who very proudly Monday morning did a press release shouting out his very cool sounding Operation Gatekeeper, where he intercepted $160 million worth of NVIDIA 100s and 200s. In the announcement, he says that these chips are the building blocks of AI superiority and integral to modern military applications. The country that controls these chips will control technology. The country that controls AI technology will control the future. And then at 4:29 p.m., President Donald Trump hits us with the Truth Social saying that the United States will allow NVIDIA to ship its H200 products to approved customers in China. Dmitri, make sense of this for me.
Well, look, there's no way to sugarcoat this. This is just a total disaster. And it's not just the DOJ, U.S. Attorney General statement saying how critical AI is to military applications. The president's own AI action plan talked about how the United States must aggressively adopt AI within its armed forces if it is to maintain its global military preeminence while also ensuring that the use of AI is secure and reliable. This is absolutely, of course, essential to the U.S. military dominance, to U.S. intelligence community's successes, and the administration, you have to give them credit, is doing a lot to ensure that the U.S. government at all levels is adopting AI. And why we would enable China to do the same is just beyond me. I mean, are we going to start selling them aircraft carriers, Virginia-class submarines? Let's let them into AUKUS. I mean, this is what we're doing now. It is absolutely outrageous that Jensen Huang has been able to put wool over eyes of people in government and on the Hill and convince them somehow that arming our primary adversary, the one that we're unquestionably are in a Cold War with, is somehow good for America. I get that it's good for him personally. I get that it's good for NVIDIA to have more sales, but it is an absolute disaster for our national security.
Here's the thing that I really can't wrap my head around. The pitch that Jensen and NVIDIA are making to the world is that this technology is going to revolutionize every industry under the sun. Every GTC, they announce new partnerships with new verticals, talking about how, automotive and finance and insurance and like healthcare and education are all going to need like an outrageous amount of GPU capacity in order to get the most out of AI in the coming years. Simultaneously, you have Jensen Huang, when he's asked this question directly, like, what are the sort of military second order effects of different countries getting a lot of GPUs, where basically he says, look, the PLA, they'll figure it out. They'll be able to get whatever chips they want. And, by the way, they're too smart to like want to use our chips with anything sort of like sensitive or dual use. So I don't understand how this technology you need the most of to get the most out of for everything except military applications.
No, of course it doesn't make sense. It's going to transform everything. And by the way, even on the civilian use cases that he talks about, do we want China to win in all of those use cases in automotive and energy and everything else? Because that's what you're doing by selling it to them. Of course, the primary concern is on the military and their intelligence services, but also we have an economic competition. And I would rather kneecap Chinese competitors to enable our own companies to succeed, right? Why would you do that? And look, this is equivalent to selling to the Soviet Union in the 1970s Cray supercomputers. No one in their right mind even considered doing that, despite the fact that you could have made the case, oh my God, it's going to help them with agriculture. It's going to feed starving people in Africa, right, if the Soviet Union is producing more wheat. No one said that because you also can use it for nuclear weapons explosion testing and lots of other military applications. And we didn't even have a debate about that. It was just accepted common wisdom that that's a really dumb idea. We're not going to do it. And to do this, 50 years later to another competitor that we're in a Cold War with is just unbelievable in its short-mindedness and pursuit of profit above national security. Jensen Huang, as you know, said if you're a China hawk, you're basically unpatriotic and un-American. Well, I think pushing to sell supercomputing capabilities to the Chinese military is as unpatriotic and un-American as it comes.
Jensen, if you're listening, offers open. Welcome to come on China Talk anytime. Make the case. But in the meantime, we're going to unpack more of this, Dmitri. What I thought was really interesting over the past few months is you started to see more companies who were nominally sort of been very cowed over the past few months, worried about their access to NVIDIA compute, starting to speak up a little bit. I mean, Microsoft came out in favor of the GAIN Act, right? And I think that is something which goes to illustrate the fact that like the gains to sort of the American broader technological complex to selling these chips to China are pretty limited to NVIDIA specifically. Like all the hyperscalers are not all that excited. All the AI labs are not all that excited that there's now another buyer for this compute. All of the companies that are going to be needing to get access to this compute from the hyperscalers and the neo clouds and buying their own chips or whatever, and fighting for like access to production lines on TSMC now have a whole new buyer that they're going to be sort of having to edge out and pay more from. So like the upside, it does seem to me to be pretty narrow, especially when the strongest argument that NVIDIA makes that like the world, including China, will now be sort of like locked into CUDA, just seems like a pretty far-fetched one going forward.
Well, it's not just far-fetched, it's knowingly false, right? But let's address the GAIN Act first, right? It is the ultimate America First Act, right? The GAIN Act basically said that before you are allowed to sell chips to our countries of concerns like China, you're going to make sure that the U.S. demand is satisfied, i.e. American companies are going to be first in line for chips. Mm-hmm. How anyone could possibly argue against this act is beyond me, right? It is the ultimate patriotic act. We're not even saying we're going to cut China off and make sure that their military doesn't get any chips. We're just saying, let's make sure that American companies, including ones that are providing those chips for U.S. intelligence community, U.S. military, and so forth, have priority, right? Just an absolute no-brainer. And I've talked to not just the hyperscalers who are essentially supportive of this act, but even other chips companies that are in this play who are basically saying, look, we may have had some issues about the structure of the bureaucracy in BIS that would be authorizing this, but we kind of agree with the concept, right? But the fight was not over that. The fight was we should have no restrictions on sales to China, which is just absolutely unbelievable. Now, let me take this argument that Jensen uses, which is just so absolutely ridiculous, that we want China to be addicted to the American tech stack. There is no addiction. This is not cocaine. In fact, you see this today, right? With every single hyperscaler, whether it's Google, whether it's Amazon, whether it's Microsoft with Maya, where it's now Meta with their own chips that they're building, saying that we're going to move off CUDA. And in fact, many of them already moving off CUDA, right? The top two models, arguably, frontier models, Claude and Gemini, are reportedly trained on Trainium on Amazon and TPUs on Google, right? And the fact of the matter is, because there's not enough chips to go around, and for cost reasons as well and strategic reasons, pretty much every frontier company is now using multi-chip architecture. So they're not using only CUDA, they're using Trainiums, they're using TPUs, they're using all sorts of things. So there is absolutely no addiction. And by the way, they were able to make that switch in a matter of months. Very, very easy. I mean, this is software, this is APIs. And by the way, what's great about AI is the ability to feed it an API and say, rewrite it in the form of another API. It is absolutely trivial to do that. So here's what's going to happen. We're going to sell these H200s. And by the way, this is probably the start of a broader concession on Blackwell's and, Rubin after that. So, I assume that Jensen is not going to stop just at H200s. He's going to want to sell everything to them. And the Chinese, of course, want to receive the latest and greatest chips, not just the Hopper generation. Um, but here's what's going to happen. We're going to sell them those chips. They're going to build models that are competitive, right? DeepSeek, Gwen, all these folks, Kimi, are really, really good. They're probably at most 12 months behind. They're going to quickly catch up. They're going to become the leading models. And at the same time, China is going to keep investing in Huawei because guess what? Chinese are not stupid. Jensen say, oh, by the way, if we don't sell them chips, they're going to invest in their own chips, in Huawei Ascend chips. Well, they're doing that anyway. And Xi Jinping is going to demand that they do that, which is why you're seeing the response from China saying we're going to restrict the importation of H200s to make sure that Huawei is not hurt, to make sure that they still have demand from indigenous customers. So Huawei Ascend chips are only going to keep getting better. Eventually, they're going to catch up. And all of these Chinese companies that are quote unquote addicted to the American AI stack will instantly switch and probably will switch in a matter of days or weeks at most. So what have you achieved? You've basically given away your lead in AI in the frontier models, and eventually they'll have chips that will replace NVIDIA's. It is just absolutely myopic. And in fact, it is stupid for NVIDIA's own business model. It is so short-sighted that you're focused on the next quarter and next year versus what's going to happen a couple years from now when China is going to dominate both the chips and the frontier models.
If this goes through and you get tens of billions of dollars of chips exported to China, and the future you portend is right, Dmitri, that China develops models which are not fast followers but are actually like significantly more capable than the frontier coming out of OpenAI, Anthropic, or Google. Like the political price to pay, I don't know, maybe I'm just in this weird AI world, but this was a big thing that he talked about on the campaign. I mean, it is a large part of like the Trump rhetoric. We want to win the AI race, American AI dominance, right? And a year from now, 18 months from now, if China's coming out with crazy new AI powered technologies, like because they were all trained on NVIDIA chips, I mean, that's a really tricky political dance that I don't think nice calls from Jensen is going to necessarily pay off from.
No, and we're already there, right? Literally almost a year ago, there was this brouhaha about the release of DeepSeek. I think unwarranted because it shouldn't have been a surprise to anyone paying close attention to this. But people are saying, "Oh my God, the Chinese are catching up." Well, of course, they announced in their paper that they built it on A100 chips, and no one should have been surprised because those chips were, until recently not restricted at all from going to China. So the reality is that you're going to have another DeepSeek moment, except it's going to be even worse because DeepSeek, while pretty good, was still behind frontier models. You're going to have models that are going to be way, way better, right? What is happening with OpenAI right now where, Sam is in panic mode over Gemini 3 because it is now eclipsing it in capabilities is going to happen to all the frontier models and to America more broadly when we realize that Chinese are absolutely crushing us because they've got cheaper power, they've got tons of researchers, they've got the state subsidies that they're going to use, and the one thing that they were missing, the compute, is now going to start flowing into China.
Yeah, and sort of what they had with the compute, there's been some reporting in the FT about this, is they ended up training models in Malaysia or Singapore, which not great, but also not ideal, not as well run as what Ali Cloud spinning up lots of H800s is going to be, in China, where you can have the more straightforward back and forth. You're not dealing with random power outages, and you get the cheap power and whatnot.
And by the way, we should have been cracking down on those accesses in Malaysia and elsewhere and making it more difficult for them to get access to those chips. But by the way, by shipping them to China, guess what's going to happen? They're going to prioritize setting those chips up on the high side on their intelligence and military networks, right? Where, obviously those agencies are not able to use public clouds in Malaysia for their classified data. Now they'll be able to do so because they'll be able to grab those chips from private companies in China and prioritizing for military purposes as they do with everything else.
Yeah, it seems like that is the most salient reason to want to have the chips in your country. Training models in Malaysia, kind of annoying, but maybe 10% annoying. There's also some sort of data privacy restrictions, which you can get around if it's really that big a deal if you're serving domestic consumers in China. But what do you actually want complete control of your chips for, like the sensitive, sexy stuff, which you would not trust your random, like, Singaporean cutout to do for you.
Yeah. And by the way, again, the U.S. government cannot get enough chips. I've been talking to agencies that are literally like, we're so compute dependent for inference, we cannot get enough chips. And now we're shipping part of that supply chain to China. Like, how can that possibly make sense?
All right. Let's maybe flip this on this head. So
one more point, by the way, right? H200s, obviously it's a Hopper generation. It's not the latest Blackwell generation. But guess what? It's got high bandwidth memory in it. And we have a current ban on export of high bandwidth memory to China. So the implications of the H200 decision may be even broader, where suddenly we're going to say, well, high bandwidth memory is why try to protect that when we're already sending it on NVIDIA chips to them, right? So we may have a cascading failures of export controls here, and the entire regime may collapse, because I'm already hearing that there are considerations to even relax export controls on semiconductor manufacturing equipment so that it would become even easier for Huawei to manufacture send chips in China. I hope that's not going to happen, but there are people in the administration that are pushing for this.
So on the administration dynamics, I mean, we've come a long way in 12 months. We started with them banning the H20, right? That was something that the Biden administration didn't do. We had the Laura Loomer saga with, the twilight of the China hawks. Then we had in sort of a lot of flirting, most recently reporting about how on the plane to the Xi meetup with Korea, there was an intervention by, I think it was Bessent, Greer, and Rubio saying, please don't give him the chips. Please don't give him the chips. He doesn't give him the chips. And then we're like a month later, this is not like something tied to a concession by China, right? Like all they have done so far is like maybe continue to buy the soybeans. I don't know, TBD. I mean, the thing that they've done is started to bully Japan, right? Like that's the only like big new development. And then we're deciding that we're gonna kind of throw this other carrot into the mix. I mean, it's weird, man. It's weird.
China is not even asking for this, right? That's the crazy thing. It didn't even come up in the Trump-Xi meeting. Right, this is a concession to Jensen. This is enabling NVIDIA to make money at the expense of U.S. national security. That's what this is. I could actually understand this if this was a trade to get rare earths or something else that we desperately want from China. A commitment not to invade Taiwan. They're never going to do that, of course. But this was none of that. We're getting literally nothing for it. And it's literally a favor to Jensen, and it's a favor to China and the PLA. This is what this is.
And it's not even that big a favor to my 401k. It went up by like 2.5%. Come on.
Well, NVIDIA, I think, is in real trouble because its U.S. market is going to shrink because its primary customers, all the major hyperscalers, are building their own chips and want to get off NVIDIA chips, right? So it's desperately looking for another market. China is that one market. Obviously, the Middle East is another secondary one, and that is why it is pushing so hard for these export controls to be lifted to enable its sales. Johnson probably thinks, and perhaps correctly, that this is an existential problem for him.
I appreciate your energy, Dmitri. I am so tired of this. These guys are fucking exhausting me. And I gotta give Jensen credit for his stamina in, making those calls and fighting through. And I mean, kind of delivering twice now, right? Where we got the H20s and China said no. I mean, well, let's talk about, I'm sorry, let me cut that.
And he killed the GAIN Act.
Yeah. And he killed the GAIN Act. The man's on a roll. He's got a touch.
And by the way, he's not just going after the China hawks. Literally the entire industry, from the hyperscalers, other chips companies, are on the other side of the ledger. He's single-handedly beating everyone in this town. It is astonishing.
I remember I asked you on a podcast a year ago, like, why there aren't more very rich people who sort of invest their time and energy into trying to shape political outcomes. And I think we've the thesis being that, like, if you put the time and work in, you actually get results. And this is like a exhibition A. going forward, I think, for CEOs trying to push things which like may have not pulled well initially, but if you put enough legwork and time on the phones in it, you can really make things happen.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And he's done, you got to give him kudos. He's done incredibly well at the influence game here in DC, and he's putting in the time. He's meeting with anyone. He's even said he'll meet with Warren, one of his chief critics on the Democratic side. Obviously, he's calling the president, almost daily, it seems like. And I think this is how he got this done, is that he kept badgering the president, get me chips, get me chips, get me chips. And finally, Donald Trump said, fine. Here you go. I'll get 25% of the cut.
Yeah, it comes back, I think, to good chunks of this administration just not buying the riff that we went on in the first 5 minutes of the podcast, that like, A, this is a strategic competition with important military dimensions, and B, that like these chips are important to national security. But you would think even if you set those two apart, like you would still have the C point of like, it helps American industry not to have stronger Chinese competitors, like broadly in like all the different avenues that we are going to be competing with this country economically over the coming decades, and having access to the thing which is most likely to be pushing, the frontier for industry and worker productivity. You want to have more of that on the U.S. and allied ledger than on the Chinese ledger. But
yeah, look, I actually don't agree with you, Jordan. I actually think the vast majority of this administration is not on board with this decision, is on board that we are in at least strategic competition. I think it's a Cold War, and I know a number of people in the administration do agree with that as well, with China. I think that the argument that prevailed with the president is this idea, let's sell them the American AI stack. It'll be good for American businesses. And from a national security perspective, they'll be more addicted to it. But as we just discussed, it's an argument that makes no sense. It's an argument that, Jensen's basically lied about, because there is no addiction to the stack. It's easy to move off of it. And unfortunately, he's been able to carry the day for now.
And by the way, Dmitri, this is not selling the stack. Selling the stack is NVIDIA chips run by AWS, Amazon, whatever, Cohere, Nebula, sure, why not? Running Western models.
That's right.
This is selling the lowest level. But I guess, and maybe if the SME thing comes true, we'll be selling the two lowest levels.
I mean, this is literally the equivalent of saying, we're going to sell the Ford cars to China because they're going to get so addicted to those cars they won't be able to move to any other car. It is stupid on its face, and that's exactly what's happening with this tech stack argument. But as you point out,
it's just selling the axles.
Yeah,
it's not even selling the Ford car.
That's right. That's all it is. To summarize this, the huge problems here are, A, you are enabling the Chinese military, you're enabling the Chinese intelligence services that are acting in absolutely adversarial fashion to us, that could one day be engaged in a war with us, right? You have the Department of War, this administration's Department of War, planning for a fight with China, talking in national security strategy about the need for a match or overmatch in capabilities to China, and here we are enabling Chinese capabilities. Secondary, it is prioritizing Chinese, or not prioritizing, but at least putting on equal footing Chinese firms with American firms and enabling them to compete better. Why you would do that, I don't know, because it actually hurts American companies, it hurts American economy. And by the way, this is an argument that Jensen doesn't even practice himself, right? His argument is, well, we should not be setting up export controls with our competitors, strategic competitors, because it just encourages them to innovate. Fine, Jensen. Then you should give CUDA, your CUDA framework, to AMD, because God forbid they're going to develop their own that's better. Practice what you preach, man. But you don't. You're saying, no, this is my proprietary capability. I'm protecting it with patents. I'm protecting it with trade secrets, whatever. I'm not going to let anyone have it. And of course, every other company does the same, but he is making this argument that the United States at a strategic level should not do the same. Just absolute insanity. And then you have, according to Jensen himself and every other hyperscaler and U.S. government customers and industry customers, saying that the demand for chips far outstrips supply. And in the midst of all of that, you're going to redirect part of that supply to your strategic military and economic competitor. Just shoot me now about how, we're not just trying to lose the Cold War, we're surrendering the Cold War by doing this. And this is not an AI doomer argument. I'm not an AI doomer. I actually think that this technology is going to be unbelievably amazing for economic growth, for productivity, but also, of course, for military applications, and why you would encourage and help your primary competitor to get better at it. There's literally no legitimate argument that's worth a dime for making the case for why you should do this.
Again, hey, White House, hey, NVIDIA, you guys want to come on and make those arguments? We could hash it out here. I've done so many shows on this topic over the past year, and I appreciate your energy you're still able to bring to this, Dmitri. But the reason I keep doing this is because I agree with you. I think it's really important. I really think this is a big mistake. It is, maybe we'll be saved by the MSS, who, for whatever reason, are able to convince themselves that this is all some crazy CIA plot to like backdoor, hacks into the PLA or whatever. But we might not. And then, this really nice chart that IFP put out of the total compute that the U.S. and allies have versus what China is able to produce right now is something like 13-1. No one really knows, but it's in that ballpark. Selling lots of chips to China could change that ratio considerably. This is the main variable. Like the amount that Huawei is going to be able to contribute to that ratio relative to what NVIDIA is spinning up in TSMC and in Taiwan and in Arizona to sell to the rest of the world is like that you can project that out with a pretty high degree of confidence, selling SME and selling AI chips to China. And once we start to do that, then it's not clear who's going to have more compute over the next 5, 10, 15 years. And
well, I would argue it is clear. It's going to be China because they're going to subsidize the hell out of this.
Sure.
In a way that we will never do.
I don't know where to go. I'm lost.
Well, look, it's not over, right? The Hill, including Republicans, first and foremost, are really upset about this. In the Senate and the House, don't count out Congress. I don't think the GAIN Act is dead yet. I think there's going to be a continued fight to, at least prioritize chips to go to American companies, to see what kind of restrictions we can put in place, and more export control reviews potentially by Congress, right? There's all kinds of bills that are floating on that side of the House. And by the way, Donald Trump tends to change his mind, right? So there's still an opportunity, just like Jensen was able to successfully lobby him to do this. Others may be able to do the same and revert and undo this. So the good thing about Donald Trump is you're never done, right? And whatever happens today can be undone tomorrow, and we need to take advantage of that.
And I think that's like the great irony in all of this is the idea that given all of the political hesitance on both sides of the aisle, and given the fact that Trump has changed his mind 3 or 4 times, the idea that even if the chips started, flowing tomorrow, that Alibaba, that Tencent, that, Huawei and ByteDance would bet their firm's future on continued access to NVIDIA chips is just not going to happen, because this is going to be some weird intermittent fight, which is not going to end just because of one Truth Social tweet. So like the strategy of addicting them over the long term, setting aside even the sort of like Xi Beijing level like industrial strategy aims to indigenize, is just not going to be a thing even at the corporate level.
Well, it won't be that. Not just because of the political dynamics you just mentioned, but just based on the fact that they won't be able to get all the chips they want, right? Because you have Jensen there as the king allocating NVIDIA shipments to various hyperscalers and Chinese customers, I guess, soon, and everyone else. No one is going to get enough because there's not enough to go around. So by necessity, you're going to have to rely on other chips. And by the way, no one really wants to pay the NVIDIA tax. Everyone wants to have diversification of supply and not be tied to one monopolistic actor. So they're all going to build their architectures on a multi-chip design. So no one is going to be saying, I'll only do CUDA, regardless of the political considerations here. It just makes no commercial sense to do so.
All right. Let's close on some vibe coding. I can't be too depressed going into the holidays. Dmitri, I hear you've been having some fun with 4.5 Opus recently. What's it done for you lately?
Look, it's such magic. I'm convinced, and this is a super conservative projection because I think this will happen a lot sooner, but anyone who has, even a bachelor's degree in something, not even a technical field, within 3 years will be a software engineer. And what I mean by that is that it is becoming so easy to develop apps. I've built like 2 mobile apps in the last month. I've built a web app for just like personal stuff to track various things. And Opus 4.5 is just absolute magic. I literally just built a mobile app yesterday in 15 minutes, and most of that 15 minutes went and just set up and authorizing it on an Apple store and setting up my device with it. It is just incredible, the capability, and of course it's improving rapidly every single day. So I mean, this is what, not to rehash the old point, but this is what the innovation that we have to look forward to for the future, that we want to make sure our American companies benefit from first and foremost, and our government and our citizens, and that this won't be in China. And we want American frontier companies to be the absolute best, and then we can make sure that the usage of those models is restricted from actors that we don't want to get access to. But I'll tell you, I'm on a board of a number of companies, and I'm telling them all to start metricing and measuring their engineers on their use of AI in their development tasks. And anyone who's not using AI should be considered for a PIP plan, performance improvement plan, because literally this is like, whenever, tens of thousands of years ago, they discovered hammers, and whoever didn't use hammers, fell behind. This is the next hammer, and it's an unbelievable productivity tool. In fact, what I'm seeing right now is incredible. In one of my companies, obviously they have a software engineering team that's engaging in development of their products, but they're pulling people from other departments like security and others saying, hey, help us build the next module of our product using Claude, using these different models, at least prototypes, if not fully production versions, and they're able to do it. It's unbelievable the how you're able to raise the productivity of everyone, not just software engineers doing this.
I want to say the same for analysts and think tankers and Hill staffers and folks in the executive branch. Like, it is so fun because it is a superpower. We were having this debate about, can Huawei backfill NVIDIA? Like, what's the ratio of chips or whatever? Like, it took me 45 minutes to build an entire data visualization with sliders of different assumptions of how much HBM is China going to get, how tight are the export controls going to be, how many, how much better are they going to get at using DUV? How far behind are the Huawei chips going to be to NVIDIA? And coding that up in the sort of vibe coding era would have taken days and thousands and thousands of dollars. And you could just do that. And it's such a the bicycle of aside from the fun sort of personal applications, the bicycle of the mind stuff to help you think through policy problems, I think is something that folks really should just get a taste for. Any problem you have that you're thinking over, which is knotty or confusing or has numbers in it or just has a lot of different contingencies and second order effects that are hard to keep in your head at the same time, just try asking Claude to help visualize it or help you think through a different topic or see the different side of an argument. I mean, the hallucination stuff is basically gone. I mean, you still have to fact check stuff on the margins, and you should keep your sense about you if something seems iffy. There's probably, there are bugs that emerge.
Yeah, it depends on what you're using it for, right? I mean, at some level, it's garbage in, garbage out. If you're training on Reddit and you're asking about something that's very esoteric, you're not going to get a good answer from it.
But just as a tool to wrap your head around stuff. You're not doing yourself a service to your listener if you haven't spent time with these models, trying to do different parts of your day job with it, and hanging out on Cursor and Claude Code and trying to like build little tools and little apps to make your workflow easier or allow you to do new stuff.
I tell you, Jordan, this experience of building these apps was somewhat nostalgic for me because it brought me back to the emotions that I was feeling as a kid in the 1980s when I first learned to program. And the amazing feeling you got when you code up your first, Hello World program or whatever it was, a simple game that I did in like QBasic back in the late 80s, early 90s, and the magic of seeing it run and do something was such a special feeling, and you got such pride of being able to accomplish it. And this took me back to those feelings of like being able to do a couple of prompts and generate code that just runs and does something on my phone or on the web app or whatever with so little effort. It sort of it got me to think, oh my God, this is magic, right? Just like the magic that I felt of writing that program and having it do something. And back then you had to have technical expertise. You had to learn programming language. You still need some technical skills today, particularly when you're debugging this stuff, or if you don't understand how Swift works or how to deploy iOS apps or whatever, or how to ask the right questions. But all of that stuff, probably within months,
it's going
away, right? The accessibility of this, the magic of programming that we in the technical field have experienced for so many decades, that was a pretty exclusive field that, people thought that, only these nerds can access this magic. Well, now everyone will be able to do so. And that is going to revolutionize everything. And the most interesting thing about AI, in my view, Jordan, is not actually that it's going to make the tasks that you just talked about easier and faster and more accessible, but it's going to make other things that you would never ever do more accessible. Right? The cost of software engineering is going to drop to basically free, and that means that everyone is going to be building dozens of apps for their life, for their grocery list, for their kids' management, whatever it may be, because it's so easy to do so. And that build something that's not only custom to you, but there otherwise would be no market for it because it's only good for you. And even for coders, we would not necessarily spend our time and effort building those apps unless they were really important, because it's a lot of effort. And now that effort is basically gone.
Yeah, the activation energy for like doing a side project has just dropped to zero. So the thing that I'm really excited to be created, Dmitri, is the like senior policy official simulator, which like, of course, is what a fucking China talk vibe coding idea. But it is, I do think, you read all these memoirs
so nerdy.
But you read all these memoirs of like these government officials. Jake Sullivan, when he was on our podcast, was talking about how like the big thing that you couldn't really experience before is just the idea of being in the crisis. Tim Geithner, same thing. It's like, oh, okay, all of a sudden it's 2009. It's not like you've lived through a financial crisis before, right? And just having this sort of visceral experience of the like VR situation room meetings, the VR flight on the plane with the president trying to convince them not to sell chips to China. I do think that getting reps in those sort of like high stakes political, personal, commercial situations. It doesn't just have to be for politics and national security. All of these sort of like nuclear simulation things. We just had this movie come out, which like was fine, but the point being that we haven't had a big nuclear crisis in a very long time. Like having the sort of deeper human emergent capabilities that like the AI simulations of these things can provide just seem to be like a really big upside for human competence when dealing with crises in the future. I don't know. I'm excited about it. Someone,
Totally.
Rockstar Games, if you're out there, give me a call. We can do some cool stuff together.
I love it.
Dmitri, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for being a part of China Talk.
Thanks for having me, Jordan.
Jameson Greer, sir. I'm your man on trade. I've read every tariff schedule that this government has made. I've sat across from Brussels, I've stared down Tokyo, but I've never been more certain about a word I have to say. No, I know you love a deal, sir, and I respect you for it too, but there's some things we just can't sell no matter what they offer you. Those H200s ain't tractors, they ain't soybeans, they ain't coal. They're the keys to every kingdom and the engine of control. Don't let the chips fall to Beijing tonight. We build them in America, we gotta hold them tight. See, Jippin's on the phone, says he'll pay us double time, but some things ain't for sale, sir. That's the bottom line. Jensen Home keeps calling, says his shareholders are blue, but I'd rather disappoint NVIDIA than lose this race to you know who. They'll train up models faster than a coyote runs from rain, then turn around and use them building drones and wartime games. Don't let the chips fall to Beijing tonight. We build them in America, we gotta hold them tight. They'll say it's just for data centers, mining Bitcoin too, but we both know that's a lie, sir. And so do you. Remember when we had the lead in steel and cars and coal? We let it slip through diplomats who couldn't save their soul. They told us trade would change them, said the market set some free. Now they're building carriers, sir, and they're sailing past Taipei. And don't let the chips fall to Beijing tonight. Tell them Jameson said no. We'll sell them pork and timber, we'll sell them planes that fly, but the silicone stays home, sir. Till the day I die,